No, they tend to jump on a little bit later too. So
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
okay, I'm gonna start the broadcast.
Okay. I'll just
Okay,
shut up until you tell me to start talking.
and it's very quick too. So be ready.
I'm ready.
All right.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us during your lunch break for this webinar. One of Expo's best, Bill Petrie, is here with us from Brandivate Marketing. Bill has over 15 years working in an executive leadership position at leading promotional products. In 2014, he launched Brandivate. He's also now president of PPMS. Congratulations on that. PPAMS, sorry about that. My name is Rocio. I'm here. I work here at SAGNY, Programming Manager. I just wanted to let you all know if you guys have any questions throughout the webinar, there is a question panel there that you can type in your questions. We will be addressing them towards the end of the webinar after Bill is finished presenting. So feel free to type them in. I am looking at them and I will be addressing them once Bill is finished. Thank you again for joining us. Bill, it's a pleasure having you once again on our webinars, and I'm handing it over to you.
Excellent, thank you, and thank you everybody for taking some time out of your afternoon to hear me prattle on about some strategies to reduce client friction, so hopefully everybody can sell more. So I'm just going to run right into it, and I'll answer any questions at the end. So here we go. There we go. So what I want to start by telling you is that really we are in the middle of a cultural hurricane, and it's impacting every single thing that we do, and I think we all know this, but a lot of people in our industry, it may not feel like we are, but I promise you we are in one. So if we look back at just 40 years ago, 1977, this was the most effective and immediate form of communication, and sadly, I'm old enough to remember what a rotary dial phone looked like and how it was used. But if we jump forward 20 years, it was essentially the same communication device in 1997. It was just an upgrade. There were push buttons, a smaller actual phone, but it was essentially the same type of communication. If we jump ahead from 1997 to 2017, we have a completely different communication device that rendered the phone as we knew it, or as I knew it growing up, completely obsolete. And you can even go on the PPAI website or a SAGNY website or VAPA website or any of the fabulous District 1 websites, which I highly encourage you to go into, and I'm sure everybody would love to do that. So it rendered it completely obsolete. The same thing is for sending large parts of communication. In 1977, you'd send things through the mail. In 1997, if everybody remembers the old fax machine, you would send large files by fax. And now, in 2017, we do it by either email, or if it's a really large file, we'll do it by some sort of file sharing software online through the cloud, like Dropbox. Same goes for gathering information. Now, a lot of you may not even remember what this is. I know my kids, I have 14-year-old twin boys, they would have a hard time knowing what a 4-foot row of Encyclopedia Britannicas looked like, let alone what they actually did. But 1977, this is how we got information. We would look it up in the Encyclopedia Britannica. We fast forward 20 years to 1997, and we went to an online version of that, or an actually computerized version that came on CD-ROM discs. It was still obsolete, pretty close to after it was issued, but it was a little more updated, a little easier to update. And if we flash forward, now what do we use? We use Google. And if we think about it, Google's completely transformed the way we search for information. Because when I was a kid, if I got bored on a rainy Saturday afternoon, I might pull out the Encyclopedia Britannica and look something up. I might grab S and just start looking at all the things under the letter S. Whereas with Google, you have to know what you're looking for. So it's fundamentally shifted the way we seek information. Now, if we start drilling it down to advertising and then to our industry, in 1977, if you wanted to reach the widest variety of people, you would advertise nationally on the most popular TV show at the time, which was Starsky and Hutch, on a really bad-looking TV like that. If you fast forward 20 years, you would do pretty much the same thing. There was a little more competition. There was cable television, but the #1 show at the time was Seinfeld. If we fast forward to now, the way you would reach mass people is through YouTube or other social media. And a lot of people don't realize that YouTube is the second largest search engine besides Google, right after Google. So this, again, has completely transformed the way we really go about our lives. Now let's drill it down to our industry. In 1977, the vast majority of distributors, they would take a stack of catalogs to their client and they'd put them on the desk, say, Mr. Client, we can put your logo on any product in here, and it was magical. If we fast forward 20 years, that's right, same exact process. People would be dropping off a catalog and saying, Mr. Client, let us know what you want your logo on, because we can put your logo on anything in this catalog. What is a little frightening is, I think, if we fast forward to 2017, there are still quite a few distributors doing business this way, dropping off those catalog. The good news for you, this is hopefully how your competition is going to market. They fear technology, they're scared to death of millennials, and in a sense they're sticking their heads in the sand. They're refusing to believe a few things about our industry, and that our industry really is in the middle of our own cultural hurricane. Information is now easier to gather than ever before, and it's also cheaper than ever before. We touched on Google a few seconds ago. It is the way everybody gets information, and it's easy to get information. The industry is consolidating both on the supplier side and on the distributor side at an increasingly rapid pace, and that's not going to slow down. The supply chain is shrinking, and there's really no more magic in what we do. And if you don't believe me, when you have a second, take out your cell phone or when you get on your computer and go to Google and type in promotional products industry pricing codes. Our clients have a better understanding of the way our industry works than we do. So the vast majority of distributors, as I see it, they know the world's changing around them, but they're almost paralyzed by fear to do anything about it. So this hurricane that we're in, a lot of people fail to see it because we're in the eye of that hurricane. Things seem to be changing so rapidly around us and what we do, but in that eye of the hurricane, it's very calm. We don't feel it. So it's changing the way we go to market, and too many people are clinging to that calm of the eye and thinking that the changes in our society are not necessarily going to super impact our industry. So today is Thursday, February 23rd. I'm here in Nashville, which is where I live, and I don't think we've had a winter. I think it's a little chillier up where most of you are. But the current state of selling stuff, like I said, customers have access to more information and choices than ever before. This means that for the first time, clients are truly in the driver's seat, and what they want is a transaction that's as close to frictionless as possible. They want accuracy. They want efficiency. They really have no problem either being loyal to a provider or switching. It all depends on the whole experience that they get from the provider, but they still crave that bond, and it always comes down to the customer experiences. So hopefully all of you on this webinar know that the world and the way goods and services have been sold for decades is evolving. I hope we all agree on that. I can't get feedback from you, which is always challenging to do in a webinar, but I hope we all agree that it is evolving a little bit. So while the world and our clients are evolving, the basic concept of a sales transaction hasn't changed, and it won't change. And in fact, it hasn't changed for centuries. Business is based on transactions. Those transactions always happen between a provider and a consumer. Both sides of that transaction are going to do every single thing they can to maximize the value. So if you're a distributor, you're going to always try to protect your margin. You're going to try to maximize value on your end. And your client is always going to beat you up on price because they're trying to maximize the value on their end. And that value is always going to be realized through transactions. So at its core, your business, my business, the guy across the world's business, it's all based on the simple concept of exchanging value between the provider and the consumer. And even if we look at a case of a consumer providing something for free, there's still an exchange for value. And if we go back to the Google example, they're a perfect one. They provide a free service in exchange for what? You go to Google, what does Google get out of you? You get information, but what does Google get out of you? They collect your data, right? And they're going to show you advertising. So if you've ever Googled something, maybe you're looking for a specific product and you go find it, it's almost unsettling the next time you go on Facebook or another site, you'll see an ad for that exact product. So they're taking your data in exchange for giving you essentially all the information of the world at your fingertips. And to the advertiser, they provide a service that delivers an enormous worldwide audience, right? And it delivers that targeted audience. That's what they do. It delivers that target audience right to the consumer. So let's take a little bit of a deeper look at a transaction. So just like this golf ball sitting on a tee, a business transaction doesn't happen without applying a little force. And I tend to think of most end users, most consumers, to be in a state of rest. And assuming we all agree on this, and I hope we do, it's our responsibility to move an object that's at rest, right? So if we look at Newton's first law, we remember our Sir Isaac Newton lessons in school, his first law states an object's going to remain at rest until it's acted upon by an external force. That external force is you. So in our increasingly digital world, that force can come from any number of directions. It could be a cold call from you. It could be a product search by the client. It could be an online ad. It could be Google AdWords. It could be a recommendation from a friend or a coworker or someone else of influence. It could be a direct mail piece that you give. It could be a spec sample you drop off. Even could be at an end user show. It could even be a cold call from you as a salesperson. But the point is, it is your full responsibility as the provider. This is the first thing I want you to write down. It is your responsibility as a provider to create the force necessary to get the consumer moving. And once we get the consumer moving, we have to ensure two things. One, that they continue to move in our direction, right? We want to keep them moving along that sales purchasing journey. And two, we don't do anything to slow it down. I have an expression I like to use when I'm describing chaos, and it's a goat rodeo. And this is exactly where your clients are in the pipeline. Clients don't want to be sold, but they do want to be convinced. And so in the process of being convinced to purchase from you, they start looking away because here's where the challenge is right now. 70% of purchasing decisions are made before you're ever contacted because of the ease of information that I talked about earlier. So when you are contacted, this is where you can help or hinder that purchasing process. It's critical that each of you have an understanding of your client's purchasing journey. Number one, you want to know what their pain is, right? How long have they experienced that pain? Why is it important that the pain go away? What other solutions have they tried to ease that pain? How much are they willing to spend to ease the pain? I always want to know how much my clients are going to spend. And how will they measure if, in fact, that pain was alleviated? So once you do this, and I hope many of you are already doing this, you can begin to kind of shepherd your goats through their individual rodeos. So the second thing I want you to write down it is your full responsibility as the provider to understand your customer's purchasing journey and make it as easy as possible. Now we know every transaction has resistance points, but you have to understand what they are. Now traditionally those resistance points, they're called objections, and if you went to some sort of sales training, you had to master them and learn all these tricks to overcome the objectives, like the objections like the assumptive close and the Ben Franklin close and all that. That's not what I'm talking about. Like I said, we are in a consumer-directed sales process. And it's one that happens outside of human interaction, as I just mentioned on the last slide, which means overcoming those resistance points can be much more difficult, mainly because there's no one there to ask. If you are making a purchasing decision based solely on looking online, you can make that decision without ever talking to a salesperson to help ease you through that process. So you have to understand and anticipate those resistance points. And I want to give an example of a company that has done that. So Progressive Insurance, and some of you may even be insured by Progressive. So Progressive Insurance and the way they quote car insurance is a perfect example. We all know car insurance is a price-sensitive service. It tends to be somewhat complicated. It has a ton of variables, and every car insurance company has their own weird little pricing scheme. Oh, and also everyone wants to feel like they're getting a good price, even though it's something we're all required to buy by law. We're all required to purchase it based on laws, right? So Progressive knew it was a resistance point, and it slowed. What they did, they decided to slow down the purchasing journey, or they knew it slowed down the purchasing journey, I should say, but they wanted to speed it up, and they did this by realizing two things. One, price shopping was going to happen, and number two, if someone purchased from Progressive but later found out they could have gotten a better price somewhere else, they were ultimately going to lose that customer. So they knew those two things. So what they decided to do to accelerate the process is circumvent the entire process itself and show not only their price, but they showed the price of their competition. And it was a brilliant move. They understood that the main transaction resistance point, what it was price in comparative shopping, and they mitigated it. In the first year that they instituted that program, and if you go on Progressive's site right now, you can absolutely see they'll price it out and they'll compare against State Farm and Geico and so on and so forth. Their sales jumped 30%. So it absolutely works. When you can understand what your client's resistance points are or what they're probably going to be and mitigate them before they even happen, you can help eliminate some friction in the sales process. So the third thing I want you to write down, it's your responsibility as the provider to really understand those transaction resistance points and find ways to eliminate them. So just a quick recap on these three things. So these are the three things that's your responsibility. Number one, you need to create the force necessary to move the client. Number two, you need to make the purchasing journey for them as easy as possible. And three, you need to understand and eliminate those friction points. So all this is working towards what everybody hopes to be is a frictionless transaction, right? It's one without resistance points. But there's always going to be some friction. And you know what? That's really okay, because the client knows that there's going to be friction, just like we know there's going to be friction when we buy something or maybe have to return something. And when we as salespeople make it easier, when we remove some of that friction from the process, we inherently build value beyond simple decorated merchandise into the transaction. And when we do this, we begin to evolve our client or our customers from being a one-time transaction into a long-term client. And this is the stuff that most of your competition is either unwilling or unable to do. And this is the revolution our industry is absolutely in right now. So how do we win? How do we beat the competition? How do we reduce friction to sell more? Well, the way I look at it is we continually strive to give 100%. But there's usually reasons, and that big finger's pointing right at you, there's reasons usually we don't give 100%. There's reasons we don't give 100%. And the first is you're too comfortable. We all love to live in our comfort zones. If we were in a room, and when I give this presentation and there's a room of people, I say the same thing. If I asked you all, let's take a quick break, everybody go outside the room and grab a quick cup of coffee and come back in, every single person would sit in the exact same seat they sat in when they left. And it's because we as human beings crave comfort. So maybe you've become too comfortable. And we all know it's only going beyond our boundaries that we learn to live and expand our experience, but sometimes that's hard to do. It's hard to do. So if you're too comfortable, it's hard to give 100%. Number two, maybe you got a bad attitude like Johnny Cash does right there. And a bad attitude can completely impact your entire world. Don't underestimate the power of a positive or negative attitude. A positive attitude is going to lift your spirits, and a negative one's going to kill it. And if your attitude is slacking, find someone who has a positive outlook, because that attitude is absolutely contagious. I know when I have a bad attitude towards something, I always like to say, I know what my personality brings to the party when I'm not in a good mood, and it absolutely impacts not only my experience but everybody else's as well. Maybe you're scared of failure. You know, kids like to think their parents and adults are, in general, are fearless. In reality, I think it's the other way around. Like I said, I have 14-year-old twin boys, and one of them I absolutely admire because he's so fearless. So ask yourself, when was the last time you failed? Because failure is that necessary fuel for innovation. It really is, and it's the necessary fuel for us to grow as sales professionals. So if fear of failure is keeping you from trying your best, it's time to try to push yourself and maybe risk failure. Failure is proof you tried. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold. I believe I've been infected with the Vegas flu for about 6 weeks now since Expo. Maybe you're not hungry. Maybe you're not hungry. What do you want to achieve? What do you want to accomplish? If you don't have goals, you're not going to have anything to give 100% towards. So make sure you have aspirations that absolutely stretch your limits, because if you're not hungry, you're not going to go try to grow your client base. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you just don't care. And not caring about your job or your work is absolutely 100% a self-fulfilling prophecy. I've encountered many people like this in the corporate world, that they just don't care, and I'm sure many of you have the same way. And when people begin that downward slide of I don't care, they don't realize that they've stopped caring and that they've stopped performing. So if you don't have a passion for what you're doing or the company you do it for, by all means, you should find something else to do, because that passion for what you do is contagious. And we can all think of times when we've worked with a client and we're excited about the project right along with them. You need to harness that and care. It's really important to care. Maybe you're too busy. How many of you feel like you're so busy that it prevents you from giving 100% of your time or attention or focus to anything? I'm here to say that that's a load of crap. I am not a big fan of the word busy. Busy is an aimless activity that may or may not result in the achievement of goals. And you know, busy is one of those words that's become a catchphrase. How are you doing today, Bill? Well, I'm busy. What was your day today like, Bill? I was busy. Hey, do you have time next week to meet? I don't know, I'm busy. We all say busy. And busy just ends up meaning, it's this meaningless word we just use. So if you think I'm wrong, try and stop using the word busy for a day. Try to stop using the word busy for a day. It's amazing how difficult that is. So what does all this mean? When we allow all these reasons, and I would actually venture to say they're excuses, that prevent us from giving 100%, it means we're good enough. In other words, we've allowed mediocre to become acceptable. Is it really ever okay to be good enough, to accept good enough? Think about it this way. Next time, let's say Expo East, which is now I think in late June or July, I don't remember. I know they moved it. But several peers are talking about you and they're talking about your work. And during the conversation, they start sharing their thoughts about your style and your vision and the way you go to market and the overall value you bring to clients. And at the end of the exchange, the consensus among that group of peers is you're good enough. Think about that for a second. Do you ever truly want to be known as good enough? My sense is you don't. I know I don't want to be ever known as good enough, because good enough to me is a euphemism for I'm cool being average. I don't care enough to give my best. I'd rather blend into the background. You know why? It's safe. Good enough, in other words, to me, is mediocre. And this also translates to your clients. If your clients describe you as being good enough, you can rest assured that they will absolutely find a partner who does continually strive for greatness. Now, it's unreasonable to expect to give 100% most of the time. But really what we're talking about, it's the way out of good enough isn't some sort of magic. It's passion and purpose combined with action. So when you have a steadfast commitment in giving 100%, people will follow your lead. So when do we know when to give 100%? Because it's unrealistic to give 100% 100% of the time. We all know this. That's why a car has a red line. If you floor a car, it'll perform at an extraordinarily high and efficient level for a period of time, but at some point it's going to break down, and we all know that. So when do we know when we should be giving 100%? Well, I always like to think in terms of our industry. We all do the big things really, really well. The machine of the promotional products industry is built for us to do the big things really well, right? We all know how to source product. We all know where to get it. We all know how to take our client's logo and send it to the supplier. We all know how to deliver that merchandise on time and on budget. We all know how to invoice our clients. Now, I'm sure we're all really good at that. I know I'm excellent at invoicing my clients. I am awesome at it. We all do the big things really, really well. It's the little things that tend to matter and tend to make a big difference if we're trying to reduce friction and care about our clients. So the first one is you can't have $1 million dreams without minimum wage work ethic. And we all know people like this. People who sit and pine about, if I only got that big sale, but they do nothing to actually go get it. So the first thing you need to give 100%, and you need to care enough about yourself and your family and your sales and your career to have a $1 million work ethic. Then you can have some $1 million dreams. To me, people who have $1 million dreams and a minimum wage work ethic, it's like people who talk about wanting to win the lottery but never buy a ticket. I always make a joke on the few occasions my wife and I actually buy a lottery ticket. What that gives us, the only thing it gives us is the opportunity to talk about what if we won the lottery. If I don't have a ticket, I'm not going to talk about what if I win the lottery, because you know what? I guarantee you I'm not winning the lottery because I didn't buy a ticket. The second thing is, how many of you feel like you're really good at multitasking? And obviously I can't see a show of hands, but a lot of people feel like they're really good at multitasking. I'm here to tell you, I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all. I know how I work. I know that the quality of my work suffers when I multitask. I'm as ADD as the next person, and I know when that little envelope pops up in the lower right-hand corner of my computer screen, I will stop what I'm doing and answer it. So what I've started to do is I've started to turn off my email. And I'll explain that in a minute. My point with multitasking is we're not wired to really do that. We think we are. We think we're really good at multitasking, but the fact is we're not. And studies show this. This is not a Billism. Studies show that the quality of work increases when you focus on that. So what I would suggest you do is when you are focused on a specific task, focus on that task. If you're focused on a quote for a client, give 100% of your attention on that. Care enough to give 100% of attention to that. If you are attending this webinar, hopefully you're actually giving it 100% of your attention. If you are on the phone with a client, give them 100% of your attention. Don't get on Facebook and float around. It's terrible. It was funny. Rocio and I were talking before this, and she asked me a question, and I said, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat it because I was looking at my phone. I was not practicing what I'm preaching to you right now. So, you know, we all know those situations. And to mitigate this, because like I said, I'm as ADD as the next person, I shut off my email. I turn it on in the morning at about, when I get to the office, my office is my home, I check email, and then I shut it off for a couple hours, and then I turn it back on, and it usually takes me just a few seconds to plow through it. And the way I look at it is this way. If I'm on a plane and I don't have access to an email and I'm on a 2.5-hour flight, when I land, there's usually 20 to 50 emails waiting for me, depending on how long the flight is. And you know how long it takes me to get through that email? Probably about 5 minutes. Probably about 5 minutes, because there's a certain number of them I can just delete. There's a certain number of them I was just copied on as an FYI that I can also delete. There's a couple I might need to file, and there's maybe 3 or 4 I need to respond to. And no one ever feels that I am not being responsive to their needs. So I would encourage all of you to try that. Like I said, I check email maybe 4 times a day. That's just what I do. And it's made me a lot less nutty in terms of feeling so busy. Like we all have those days when we're in the office and we feel like we're busy but we haven't accomplished a damn thing. It's taken that away from me. And I'm able to focus. I'm far more creative because I'm focused on the specific task in front of me. I'm not bouncing around from one thing to another. So I would encourage you to what I call single task as opposed to multitask. Feedback. I love this one. This is probably, might not be my favorite. I always say all these are my favorites, but this is one I truly love. Do you guys care enough to get full and honest feedback from your clients? And I'm not talking about when you go to a client and ask them, hey, how am I doing? And you white knuckle it and they say the same thing my kids say when they come home from school. What's that? That's right, fine. So Mr. Client, how are we doing? How's everything going? Everything is fine. Well, I don't accept that answer from my kids. I assume you probably don't either. And I sure as hell don't accept it from my clients. So when you get, when a client tells you fine, I would challenge them and say, you know what? I'm glad you feel like everything's going well. I'm glad you feel like we're performing the way you need us to perform. But I have to believe there's a way we can service you better. Now that'll open up a dialogue because you know what? People are generally nice and they don't want to hurt your feelings. And that when you push back a little bit, that's when you'll hear things like, well, I didn't really want to make a big deal about it, but the sweatshirts that were delivered in October, 4 of them had holes in the underarm. It was no big deal. We had plenty of merchandise to cover the event, and I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Now, isn't that information you'd like to know? Because I guarantee that if your competition ever went into that client and got in front of them and asked them what they liked or didn't like about their current distributor, what do you think the first thing they're going to tell them? Yeah, Joe Blow came by he never followed up on everything, and they sent sweatshirts, 4 of them had holes in them. So what they're telling you isn't a big deal, really is a big deal, and that's stuff you want to know. And this is the thing, this is how you show you care. And it reduces friction because it opens up an honest dialogue with your clients where they're okay criticizing you and helping you improve. Being passionately curious. You know, if you walk into a car dealer and the salesperson's overly excited and starts telling you which car is best, what do you want to do? All right, you want to walk out the door. We all do. No one likes that. It's the same thing in promotional products, in any sort of sales. You need to think of yourself as a doctor, and this will remove a lot of friction from the process. So think of yourself as a doctor as opposed to a salesperson. So if you go to a doctor with a broken arm, the doctor doesn't go, hey, man, I am so glad you came in today because I've got the perfect solution for you. You're going to love the surgery I'm going to perform. It's going to be fantastic, and it's going to fix your bone. And then if you choose my office to do the surgery, we're going to set that bone. It's going to heal incredibly well. And if you look behind me on the wall, we've got about 14 different cast colors to choose from. You're so not going to be disappointed. I'm truly that awesome. I don't know about you, but that would freak me out, and I'd run the other way in a heartbeat. A doctor doesn't do that. No. A doctor asks about your history and attempts to understand why you have a broken arm, and he inquires about your level of pain and finds out what activities you might have done to cause the pain. Because there might be reasons. If you're a 14-year-old boy and you fall out of a tree because you're climbing it and your arm's broken, that makes sense. But if you are maybe 65 and you just fell slightly against a wall and your arm broke and it really shouldn't have, maybe it's indicative of another problem like osteoporosis. So your doctor's going to try to figure out that. And when you mirror that same dynamic in selling situations, you replace that false enthusiasm of like a used car salesman with that genuine desire, that care to understand the prospect's pain and what you can do to help them. That's where you should be giving 100% of your effort right there. Most prospects and clients are conditioned to deal with that false enthusiasm. So instead of doing that, ask questions, diagnose the problem, and offer a real solution. 100% of the time, you need to care enough about your client relationships to communicate with clarity. Clients don't want perfect. They do want honest. So feeding them lies and half-truths is absolutely no pathway to success. They want communications that are clear, they're concise, and they're candid. And I'm sure each one of us can look back in our careers and think about times where maybe we weren't as honest as we should have been with a client, and it's come back to bite us. So communicate with the client. Think about when they send their logo to you to do something, to put on a product, it goes into a black hole until you communicate with them. So there is no way to over-communicate. So be clear, be concise, and be candid, and your clients will appreciate it. Like I said, they don't want perfect, they want honest. Exude confidence 100% of the time. Care enough to be confident. You know, we all know people in our lives that just exude confidence. They walk differently, they talk differently, they have a different stature about them. People who have confidence have a fervent belief in themselves, the company they work for, and the solutions they're providing. And it allows you to act fearlessly without worrying about hearing a no or losing out on potential opportunity. And if you don't feel confident about yourself or about the company you work for or the solutions you're presenting to a client, figure something else out. You need to have that confidence. You need to feel like and be able to transfer that enthusiasm that you know exactly what you're doing, and you're excited to share that with them. The last one is have the heart of a servant 100% of the time. Care enough to have the heart of a servant 100% of the time. Great salespeople leverage their products or the services, whatever they're doing, to truly help their clients. So at the core of each transaction, we talked about transactions earlier, that salesperson that has that heart of a servant ensures the client will receive value. Okay, it's that old quote from Zig Ziglar, to first get what I want, I have to help get people what they want. And that's still true. That's still very true. So show me a salesperson who has that heart of a servant 100% of the time, and we know who they are. The ones that truly care about their clients, the ones that say no. When a client asks something unreasonable, maybe they want 10,000 products tomorrow by noon, it's not going to happen. Tell them no. That's having a heart of a servant. It's not going to help them by lying to them. So these are the things that allow you to reduce friction. But you know what's interesting? We don't get to decide if we've given 100% of the time. We don't decide if we have projected that we care. You know who does? The customer. But I got ahead of myself. See, hate when that happens. So here's a quick recap of the ways you want to give, areas you want to give 100%. It's your work ethic. It's single tasking. It's getting honest feedback. It's being passionately curious. It's communicating with clarity 100% of the time. It's being confident in everything you do and displaying that heart of the servant. And at the end of the day, the customer is the one who decides if we're removing that friction, if we are giving 100% of ourselves, if we care. We can tell people we care, but the customer is the one who decides it. And I want to tell a quick story because I do believe people remember stories more than they remember bullet points, which is why I never have bullet points in any presentation I give. But it's a story that I experienced a time when a company absolutely gave 100% at the right time, completely removed friction from the process, and showed me they cared. So I'm going to take you back to January of 2015, so 2 years ago, when I was heading to Las Vegas for the PPAI Expo, and I'm sure many of you went this year, or maybe you didn't, I don't know. And I was there, and I just launched brandivate about 2 months before, and I was very excited. It was the first time I was going to Expo on my own. It also means I was going to Expo for the first time on my own dime. And so that was a very interesting realization for me, that I was suddenly paying for things. And so I went in on a Sunday, and I was planning to leave on Thursday, and I had 14 appointments lined up with prospective clients, both suppliers and distributors, on Tuesday and Wednesday. I was really excited about that. And I got to Las Vegas on Sunday, and as can happen when we run into people we haven't seen in a while, I had a really good time Sunday night. I had a really good time. So Monday morning, I went about my day. I had a couple of meetings, and that night I decided was going to be my early night. I needed an early night. At the time I was 45, and I just can't do 4 or 5 straight nights late in Vegas any longer, and I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. So a good friend of mine on the supplier side invited me out to dinner with his team, and because I was on my own dime, well, heck, I'm not going to turn down a free meal. Why would I do that? So he invited me to dinner at Caesar's Palace, and we went over there, and it was about 13 or so people. And we went through dinner. I had one beer. I think actually I had 2 beers, but that's it. Now I will tell you, I was the only person who had 2 beers that night, and everybody was having a great time. And at the end of dinner, I just wanted to go back to the hotel, rest up. I had 7 appointments the next day, starting with a breakfast meeting. And so we walk outside, right where that red circle is, right around that circular driveway, and there was someone with us. He wanted to get a 13-person limo back to the Mandalay Bay Luxor complex. So as I said earlier, I know what my personality brings to a situation when I'm not pleased. Like I said, I just wanted to leave, but I also didn't feel comfortable leaving the group. I felt like I was part of the group, and it would have been in very poor form had I left, especially since they bought me dinner. So I walked across that little circular driveway there, right about where Evel Knievel had his misfortune when he tried to jump the fountains in Caesar's Palace in 1967. And I sat on a stone bench while they figured out whatever they were going to figure out. And about 5 minutes later, the transportation was, I guess, they figured out what the transportation was going to be. And this kid who was organizing it, he had to be 28 or 29, and he's dressed in a 3-piece suit. So if I could paint a mental picture for you, dressed in a 3-piece suit, but he was snot slinging drunk. And he sees me across that circular driveway, and he screams, "Bill!" And I look up, and he is skipping over to me in a 3-piece suit. Pretty funny scene. And I think, well, I'm a pretty funny guy, and so he gets to me, and I grab, I lock arms with him, do-si-do style, and we start skipping back as we're waiting for this 13-person limo to come. And about 3/4 of the way there, I felt a snap and fell down, and I looked up and I said, "Hey, did you just kick me?" And he looked at me and said, "No," and I stood up, and I noticed my left foot was just kind of dangling there. So I had fully ruptured my Achilles tendon in Las Vegas as a 45-year-old man, stone cold sober. That's a story. And so I had to go through the rest of the show like that. That was me, and there's my poor Achilles all wrapped up. So make a long story short, I get back to Nashville, where I live, and doctor performed surgery. It was fully ruptured, and he said, "You're going to have to stay off your foot for 6 to 8 weeks." Now, if anybody who's had a foot surgery or an Achilles tendon tear or whatever, that's the most difficult thing, is staying off your feet. It's very difficult to stay off your feet. So I was working out of the house, and I had to rely on crutches. I couldn't even go get water on my own. It was just a mess. So about 6 weeks in, I decided I want to order a knee scooter. And if you don't know what a knee scooter is, that's an e-scooter. And I ordered it from the good people at Amazon Prime, and I'm assuming many of you are Amazon Prime customers yourselves. So I ordered it on a Friday. It was to be delivered on a Monday. Well, Sunday night, as it turns out, a huge winter storm hit Nashville, and it dumped about 1/8 of an inch of snow on the ground and completely paralyzed the city. Sorry, folks, I live in the South. That's how we roll. It does shut down the city, and it boggles my mind, too. I lived in New York for 5 years and Chicago for 10, but it shuts down the city. So there was no deliveries that day from UPS. And as it turned out, that Tuesday, I had a doctor's appointment, a follow-up visit. So I go to the doctor with my wife. We brave that 1/8 of an inch of snow on the ground and get to the doctor, and he said, "Bill, I've got good news. Your healing has progressed to the point where I need you to start putting partial weight on your foot." And all I could think about was this giant box about to be delivered to my house that I didn't know what to do with. So we race back home, and I get on my computer, and I contact Amazon. And you don't call Amazon, right? You get in a chat session with them. So I explained that there was a knee scooter to be delivered today, and I no longer needed it. And I still remember his name, and his name was Chad, and I see the little text message thing that says Chad is typing. And Chad said, "Okay, let me see what I can do." Goes away for a couple minutes, comes back, and I see Chad is typing. He says, "Bill," or Mr. Petrie, whatever he called me, "great news. I've been able to contact UPS. They won't deliver it. We'll just bring it back to the warehouse." And that's great. That's exactly what I was hoping for, right? Well, I see Chad is typing again, and he says, "And because the box has never left our possession, we're going to go ahead and credit your credit card back immediately. And I'm like, wow, that's amazing. I had no idea that would happen. That's great. I see again, Chad is typing. And he said, for your trouble, I'm going to give you a $10 credit on your Amazon Prime account. My trouble, I'm the one who's causing all the problems. So what I thought was going to be a very difficult process of returning a knee scooter I no longer needed, Chad gave 100% effort at that moment when I needed it to remove any friction in that process of returning that product. They have a customer for life. I've clearly gotten plenty of mileage out of that story. I mean, who ruptures their Achilles skipping in Vegas? But besides that, the actual story of them removing friction from the process is a great one, and it's a great lesson for us all. So we're going to finish this webinar here in a minute or two, and you're going to go about your day. And what are you going to do when the poop emoji hits the fan? What do I want you to remember from this webinar? So I'm hoping that the one thing that's permeated this entire thing is that you have to care. You have to care to give 100%. If you don't care, it's absolutely impossible for you to give 100%. And by care, I mean the following. The C is having client focus 100% of the time. Now, I'm not saying the customer is always right, because we all know the customer is usually wrong. So yes, the customer isn't always right, but they are first. And keeping them in focus at all times will help you find ways to remove friction from your own purchasing process. Accountability, being accountable to yourself, to your client, to your family, to your boss, your coworkers, your company. Having that level of accountability 100% of the time will allow you to remove friction from the process. Focusing on the relationship. We are still very much in a relationship business because we take something that's very personal to someone in their brand, not their logo, their brand, and we use it on promotional merchandise to help them solve marketing problems. That is a relationship that it will never go away. You need to focus on that 100% of the time, because when you care about someone, you try to make things easier for them, don't you? Focus on that relationship. And the last is that overall client experience. How would you want to be treated if you were buying from you? And if you can't honestly tell yourself that you would be thrilled to spend money with yourself in your organization over and over again, it's time to look at your client experience. So of all the things I talked about today, I really want you to remember to care 100% of the time, to remove client friction. Care about the client, care about accountability, care about building those relationships, and care about making a complete customer experience. When you can do that 100% of the time, you're going to remove friction from the process. I don't know if there are any questions, so I'm going to turn it back over.
Yeah, so we didn't have any questions come in during the presentation, but if you guys, anyone in attendance still has anything that they'd like to address, whether it's a question or comment or sharing an experience like Bill had, ouch, please feel free to share right now. I wanted to just go ahead and share some things that are happening here in SAGNY, some of our our events that are coming up. We have a cooking event coming up, so please feel free to call our office or look on our website for all upcoming events. Also, do remember that this webinar has been recorded along with all of our other webinars. They are on our YouTube channel. If you want to contact Bill, his contact information is there. If you want to contact me, my number is 914-848-7369, extension 303. Or my email address is rocio, R-O-C-I-O, @sagny.org. No questions have come through or comments. It was a great presentation, Bill. Thank you for sharing all of this information and your story about your foot. Oh, we have a question.
Oh, great.
It's from Barry Pan. Amazon example is a good one about need to leave client with wow experience. Bill, how is your wife? He wants to know.
Oh, thank you. My wife is doing very well. For those of you who don't know, I seem to have very odd medical situations in my life. So my wife suffered sudden cardiac arrest in in August of this year, and I found her and I had to perform CPR on her, and I was just one spoke in the many people who helped save her life. She's doing very, very well. For someone whose heart stopped for what they estimate was 8.5 minutes, she's made a full and complete recovery. So thanks, Barry. I appreciate that.
Wow, Bill. Gave me chills. I'm very happy to hear that your wife is doing great. And that
Yeah, me
you were
too.
there to, yeah, that you were able to assist her in that matter.
I need to work that into a presentation. It really bum people out.
I think we should probably leave that one out and just leave your Achilles heel in.
I think so. I think so.
But yeah, wow, that's shocking and chilling, as I said. But yeah, I'm happy to hear that. No other questions have come through or comments. Barry, thank you so much for sending that in. Bill, thank you so much for presenting, and all in attendance, thank you for joining us. We'll see you here in about a month with Charity Gibson from Green Banana.
Thank
Bill,
you very much.
Thank you again. All right.
Thank you, Rocio. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Okay, you're welcome. Bye.